Hi everyone, my name is Kira. Welcome to my book YouTube channel. I'm super excited to be here. I have been reading since I was a little kid, and I've always been on like the booktube scene, and I was just really wanting to start making my own videos and how I felt about what I was reading. So here I am. Obviously my name is Bookish Bakery, so I'm gonna be including a baked good every single video. Today, actually just earlier this morning, I made a peach crisp. Picture right here. Super good. Loved it. 5 out of 5. I will be putting the link to the recipe down in the description if you want to make it yourself. Would highly recommend. But yeah, and then also my Goodreads, my Instagram account are also going to be down there. So if you want to follow me on those, see like what I'm reading at the moment, what I'm up to, feel free. But yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Let's get started. The second book I read was Fake Dates and Mooncakes, which was by Cher Lee. It is a YA rom quite YA queer rom-com between an aspiring chef named Dylan who works at his aunt's Chinese takeout in New York, and while he was doing a delivery for a guy named Adrian, who's a rude customer, he meets Theo, who is friends with Adrian, and essentially both of them are rich. So they meet, and Theo ends up feeling really bad about how Adrian had treated Dylan, so he comes and apologizes, and then they hit it off. They start hanging out, and they start fake dating because Theo needs a date for his cousin's wedding, and in return, well, not in return, if initially he had given about $5,000 through like a fund for his aunt's Chinese takeout, because they were kind of, the economy sucks. They were struggling a little bit behind on bills, so he helped them out. So in return, that's why they ended up fake dating for his cousin's wedding, just to sort of make it look good. So they of course end up falling in love and getting to know each other more, along with what's happening. And then the end of the book is really focused on big tragic thing happens to the restaurant, and Dylan, who's been wanting to go to this mooncake, hence the title, this mooncake competition, ends up finally committing to it in order to help save his restaurant. So I thought it was super cute and wholesome. I loved Dylan's relationship with his family and how much he just wanted to do for them. They also had a corgi named Clover who was adorable. Yeah, so I think, I like the side characters. I think they were, especially Dylan's side of the side characters, they were fun. But it's just a little cringy. It was just a little. It was too insta-lovey for me. I'm just like, you guys have known each other for a week. Chill out. There's also just, I feel like my problem was with this relationship was that there was just a huge power imbalance between the couple, because they gave him $5,000 and he's kind of poor already. And it was just like, serious. And I feel like there could have been really good commentary on this. There was a little, but it wasn't a lot. And the book took place like 2 months. It just didn't feel natural, and it just kind of felt a little. The pacing wasn't the best. That was a cute read. I read this audiobook and I gave it a 3.3. The next book I read, which I think was my favorite, or my second favorite, I don't remember, I have to go look through my ratings, was A Man Called Uwe. Cried like a baby. I loved it. So general summary, trigger warnings down here. So skip past, don't read it. But this book follows an older man named Uwe, who, after his wife has passed away, has been trying to kill himself. And because he feels like he has no meaning or place in the world, he's characterized, as this grumpy old man who is stuck in his ways, very short-tempered with other people, and every single time he's tried to go through with it, he's been stopped by either his new neighbors, Sonia, and her family, or his other neighbors, who we learn throughout the book he has a very deep history with all of them. And throughout the book, he's essentially forced back into society, and he learns to love life again and find purpose from what he's lost. And I loved it. He was a man who loves his wife, and he just did so much for her in the flashbacks that we saw with them. And Ube himself and just all the side characters were so fleshed out, and it felt so real. Like, it felt like I was reading something and not just a novel. It felt like I was there and not reading a book. Like, it didn't feel like it was a novel. And just the way it all came together in the ending and how it was all interwoven together was gorgeous. The cat was amazing. I'm a sucker for animal characters. And I do love the focus on how I focused on an older man, older, like an older person was focused, because a lot of the books you read are focused on these younger people, and it was so nice just to see a different perspective, especially since, you know, the rest of society kind of pushes out older people, doesn't really view them as like useful or like just kind of like a burden. Maybe that's just because I'm from America and that's just the way it happens to be here. um but yeah, and then I love the time jumps. It was super interesting. Nothing I can think of for disliking it. I can't really think of anything, which is like, I should if I want to, you know, properly rate a book, but I just couldn't think of anything that was like bad. I loved it. I wish I could read it again. I also did a sort of a paper on it for my one of my classes, so that was super fun. Got to really focus and write about it. But yeah, cried like a baby. 4.7, and I listened to it on audiobook. The next book I read was The Untold Lives of Women Who the Woman Killed by Jack the Ripper, which was by Haley Rubenhold. Also, I forgot to mention A Man Called Ube was written by Frederick Bachman, but you probably already know that, so it doesn't matter. But anyways, this was the first nonfiction book I read. Essentially, this book was like the 5 life stories of the 5 women Jack the Ripper killed in the Whitechapel area of London in 1888. The 5 women were Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. And it kind of goes into details of what it was like for those women living in London, especially like the poor and middle class women during this time, and the hardships that these women went through, whether it's like being in workplaces, which are like you exchange work for a place to sleep and some food, and just sort of like just like what it was like, and what life was like back then, and like how relationships were, like the gender imbalances in society. And I thought that was really interesting. I like that more than the actual life of the woman. I don't know. I felt like um I'll go on to that in a minute, but I think a lot of the main focus of this book was to dispel the notion that these women weren't prostitutes, and honestly, just it was really well written and really well researched. So I thought that was fun. And it just kind of challenged what our modern definition of prostitute is, because they had very, you know, the way women had to make money back then was very, you know, different, and very different definitions of like what was considered, you know, what was, you know, what was like the line between things. So I thought that was really interesting. I think my only gripe was that it felt really competitive. It felt really not competitive, repetitive. I feel like because they just had really similar lives, which was like, I mean, like you kind of, yeah, that kind of makes sense. They all grew up, you know, pretty poor or middle class, or eventually at one point were poor. So I guess that's why. But maybe, and it just, the writing wasn't super interesting. I mean, it didn't really intrigue me. Like the what she was writing about was interesting, but I think it felt very textbookish, which is like, I don't really want to read a textbook, or like, I guess in this case listen to it since I listened to this audiobook, but that's like not what I want to do when I'm reading, you know, nonfiction. So I mean, I thought it was interesting, but yeah, I rated this a 3.2. The next book I read was Butcher and Blackbird, which is written by Bryn Weaver. Okay, it was an interesting book. I think, as I wrote down in my notes, a TikTok darling, dark rom-com of 2 infamous serial killers, and their relationship, and like kind of what they weird shenanigans they get to. The man in the relationship is Rowan, who is also known as the Boston Butcher. He ends up saving Salome, who's our female main character, also known as the Orb Weaver, after she was accidentally captured after killing a man they were both after. And then they decide afterwards, because they hit it off, and they bonded over the love of killing people, they kept in contact, and every year afterwards they would meet up to compete to see who could kill another person first. Essentially, murder competition fun, I guess. Whatever, rocks your boat or whatever. I don't know. But uh oh my god, what am I thinking? But they only kill bad people. That's like the important thing. Like they aren't just like killing like random, killing random people, but they're like vigilantes, I guess, which is the only way to make this book semi okay. So I get that. So we watched them over, I think, the span of like 4 to 5 years, and we get to see little glimpses into like we get to see glimpses into like their personal lives, and the like the texting that they're doing together, and how their relationship is like kind of building. We don't get a lot of it, not as much as I wanted for a primarily romance book, but it's okay. And yeah, I think it was very funny, very wacky. And it was interesting in a good way, I guess. It was pretty light read, I thought, and the characters were just really fun to read, and honestly had some pretty good chemistry despite how it like felt kind of rushed, if that makes sense. I feel like it was just, I think wasn't really like the right. It wasn't like insta love. It felt insta lovey, but I feel like it isn't, like, thinking that these people have known each other for like 5 years. It just felt a little weird, which is like I'm trying to struggle if I like don't care if I do decide. And it was kind of felt like a fan fiction almost. Like I feel like there was I feel like it would have been a fan fiction of something, and that it was like it was like oh my god. Like it was an AU of, I don't know. It was fun. But yeah, like I said, it felt like we didn't see a lot of interactions between them, and we missed a lot of like their actual like, and we missed like a lot of their off-screen interactions. I feel like would have made me more invested in the relationship. Also, it was like crazy book, and like not in a good way sometimes. The third act twist was so out there. I didn't understand it. I'm like, where is this coming from? I don't understand what I was reading. And it made it crazier, not in a good way. Like there are some good twists that are like, wow, crazy. Not this, like, not this one. And the book was overall just kind of a TikTok vibe, which like isn't a bad thing, but just not my taste. Not what I really want to read. I have a very short time to read things. Very busy person. Not what I want to do. Not what I want to read. But yeah, I ended up reading this like on Libby e-reader, and I gave it a 3.4. Okay, I lied. This was my favorite book. A Man Called Ove was great. This one takes the cake by like 0.1 point. Anyways, I ended up reading Babel, A Necessity of Violence, an arcane history of the Oxford Translators Revolution, full title, How to Leak the Government Name by R.F. Kuang. And I cried. Yeah, I sobbed like a baby again. It was so good. Actually, I have the book here. It was great. It was great. That's all. I feel like I was just reading this, and I was just like, wow. It did take me this is a very heavy book. Like it is a very tiny, relatively tiny text, which like me personally, I just don't like it because my eyes get really distracted when I read. But it was very academically focused, and it did take some brain power. It took some brain power to read, and it took me a very long time to finish it, which I felt bad because I really enjoyed it, but it just took me a while. But essentially, so this book starts off in 18,000s, I don't know the exact year, Canton, where we meet our main character, who is currently unnamed, next to his dead mom, who died from the cholera outbreak. Suddenly, a strange white man comes and heals him with a magic bar. It's silver. Who we eventually learn is Professor Lovell, who is Robin's father. We don't know that now, but you learn it pretty quickly, so I don't really mind saying that. Who's been funding his education, so he's been reading a bunch of books, he's fluent in English, and he lets the young boy name himself Robin Swift from Gulliver's Travels, who also we never learn his real name. We never do. And he spends the next 18 years of his life being essentially groomed to attend Oxford's Royal Institution of Translation, or Babel as it's called in the books. I'll just call it that. Um, and so during his studies, he's obviously learning a lot about language and sort of the magic system, which is the magic system in this universe is based off the the meaning that is both lost and created when language is translated, and like it's imprinted on silver bars to essentially create that effect, which is so interesting. I thought that was so fun to read about. And during his time, he also becomes very close with his class of three of the students: Vic, Vic, Victoire, the Graves, Remez, Rami, Rafi, Mirza, and Latita Letty Price, who all in comparison to each other, which is the key term, come from very diverse backgrounds. Like I know, Rami, he's from. Let me search that up. I don't remember where he's from. He is from India. And I think Letty is from France, and uh, you're gonna cut that, Mohammed, editor. Cut that out where I try to talk about their backgrounds. Just I lost it. But yeah, so we essentially follow Robin on his journey of grappling with the two identities he has, both being a student and being from China, and his passion for translating and how it's being exploited to hurt not only his home countries but other non-European countries. Because this book is about colonialism. If are of Kwong, she is an academic at heart, so a lot of her books, at least this is the only one I read, but from what I know, a lot of her books are focused on a lot about colonialism and sort of the racism and what that happens. But yeah, I thought it was so well written, so well researched, and I love and the themes that it explored, exploitation, colonialism, racism, and sexism as well. I think they were done very well. Interpersonal relationships between the four, I think, were great, and they were honestly, I think, what made the book for me, and especially between Rami and Robin, they were great. I will say there were maybe like a few plot holes that maybe left me a little confused, and the pacing was off at times, which is not that big of a deal. I loved it too much that I really didn't care. Also just some like things I love, whenever I finish a book, I like to go read what other people thought about it. I will say people were complaining that about the sexism in the book, and or like especially like Robin and Rami did have like some sexist like character, like, oh my god, I'm trying to think of the word. Like they were sexist a bit themselves, which I mean, like you could argue it's like, you don't want to like idolize bad characters, but it felt pretty realistic, which like it's 1800s. Yeah, even the men will be sexist. Like, yeah, kind of a given, but like they obviously, were educated and like tried their best to not be. Like, I feel like there's a very fine line between having bad characters and then having characters realistic to their time, and I felt like this definitely lied more on, like, they were realistic to their time. Some people were also saying that the book was preachy and had no nuance about its topic, and I'm like, well, yeah, colonialism's bad. There's no, like, good side to colonialism unless you're just the perpetrator. So, I don't look, if you have like other gripes about the book, I can probably agree with. I can probably see why, but that one, you sound like an awful person. I'm sorry. Anyways, I read this book physically, as you can see, and I gave it a 4.8. It was great. I loved it. So the next book I read was Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. This was my first Sally Rooney book. This is a dual POV story which follows two brothers, Peter and Ivan, who are navigating their relationships with other people, mostly women, after their father died. Ivan is a 22-year-old socially awkward semi-chess genius who just graduated, I think, in theoretical physics. And he travels to go a chess like exposition. Like he ends up like competing against like 10 other people at once in like a little U circle, and then ended up like doing some like chess classes afterwards, and he meets a woman named Margaret, who's like the owner or like the manager of the place he was at, who's dealing with her own personal problems. He also is also just dealing with the fact that his mother is taking care of his dog right now, and she's kind of just like, get the dog out of here, and like he can't really have a dog because his apartment doesn't allow it. But he and Margaret also end up getting together. I should mention that. So there's an age gap there. But his brother Peter, who's arguably more the main character of the book, which I was more invested in Ivan. I think I just liked Ivan more. Peter was kind of an asshole. But he is a mid-30s activist and human rights lawyer who's grappling with his own relationships with two women. Sylvia, who is an ex-girlfriend and first lover, I think, who they're still very close to each other despite their breakup, and Naomi, who's a younger college student who essentially does kind of like an OF equivalent or like Twitter stuff to make ends meet, and he's grappling with the fact that he loves both of them, and God, he just can't help but kind of cheat on them. It's very much literary fiction before romance novel, and most of the book is spent on the two main characters' inner monologues and emotions, along with their emotions in relation to what's happening around them. I thought the two main characters were very realistic and very flawed characters, and their interpersonal relationships were honestly pretty interesting. I enjoyed reading about them. But the men sucked, which is why I said it felt a little realistic. They were very, again, sucked in the way that, like, most people kind of suck. There wasn't, I will say, for being a book about the brothers and, like, how they're, like, trying to fix their relationship, there wasn't a lot of interactions between them. The women also just felt like side characters for the development of the two men characters, specifically more Peter than Ivan, but definitely with Ivan too. Rather than characters of their own means, I thought they were way more. I thought the women were way more interesting than the men. I would have read a book just about the women and them dealing with these men. But yeah, and then the ending growth of the characters and the reconnection between the two brothers fell short, and it just didn't hit for me. I'm just like, this is it? This is all we get after a long book. Ugh. I think that was what was upsetting, I guess. I just feel like I put a lot of work into it to read it and didn't get anything out of it, which is my biggest gripe. So some trigger warnings down here for what was covered in this book, so I'll just watch out for those. I read this in an audiobook form and ended up giving it a 3.5. I wish I could have rated it higher, but we'll see. I'll give Sally Rooney another try and see if I like it more. The next book I read was Society of Lies by Lauren Lang. This was the one thriller I read, and it is another. I read a lot of dual POVs, I realized. But it's another dual POV between two sisters, Maya, the older one, and Naomi, who both went to Princeton at different times, and their entanglement with a eating club, because I guess that's what Princeton has. I don't go to Princeton, I wouldn't know, called Sterling Club, and a secret society branch off of it called Greystone. And they have a pretty rocky relationship due to just being relatively different people. Maya is this has like a top shot financial job at her friend's museum, but Naomi is a young English college grad who doesn't really want to go into a traditional job, who honestly doesn't really know what she wants to do, but she wants to go travel, she wants to experience it, and that's causing a bit of, them to butt heads with it. But the book essentially, that was just some background. The book starts with Maya, who's coming to Naomi's graduation to find out that Naomi has died under mysterious circumstances. And the book is essentially going through 3 different POVs of Naomi 10 months after her death, Maya current day dealing with the death of her sister, and Maya when she was in Princeton about 10 years ago, and essentially the secrets of the club and other things that led to Naomi being murdered. I'll spoil it. She was murdered, which is like, yeah, of course she was murdered. It's a thriller. What would you expect? I thought it was an interesting premise, and the author obviously I feel like she wrote this with a lot of passion and really loved it, but it was slow. It was a thriller without any thrills. Characters were just flat, and it tried to make some comments about racial power imbalance in the system, especially with, the fact that both of them are people of color, specifically, being black, and I think black Asian mix, or like her husband was black too. Miles' husband was black, and I felt like they tried to make some comments, but I felt like it fell flat. Like, it's just like, you know, essentially it like pretty much said, oh, black people are discriminated more than, white people are, and that her death wasn't being treated as properly as it should. And all those are true, but it didn't really add any more depth to that. It's got all it told us. It's just like, there was directly in the beginning of the book, there was while they were going to the police, while Maya and her husband were going to the police station, it made a very direct comment that, like, oh, he's the only black guy in here, he must be really uncomfortable, like, he looked uncomfortable. And it just, not that, like, it wasn't an untrue statement, but it just felt flat. Like, it didn't really do anything. Like, there was no theme building, nothing. I thought that was upsetting. I'm just like, I felt like it could have been great, but it wasn't. Also, there was like no secret society involvement. What secret society? I could tell you nothing about Greystone except that it was a bunch of rich people doing bad things, and like, I don't even know half the bad things that they did. It just fell flat. Again, thriller without thrills. I was so disappointed. I wanted it to be more, but I ended up giving it a 2.1. I think this might be one of the lowest books I rated, and I listened to an audiobook, and very disappointed. The next book I read was How to Kill a Witch, which was written by Zoe Zenditazi. I think there was 2 authors. I'm trying to look at the Goodreads right now, and it's being a little wonky. On the Goodreads, it was written by Zoe Venditausi. Sorry if I pronounced that. And then Claire Mitchell, who isn't they're from what I know, that they both do podcasts about this witches, and just sort of especially witches in Scotland. But yeah. So essentially this book is nonfiction, and it focuses on the Scottish witch trials in the cultural and religious state of Scotland, both before the persecutions of these women and after. And I learned a lot. I think it was super interesting. I didn't know the Scottish witch trials existed before this, which honestly, looking back, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, if it happened in Salem, it probably happened in other places. It was very interesting. It seemed like it was thoroughly researched. I came in knowing nothing. The fact that witchcraft and alternative religions were in Scotland before, but I think it was after a king, I don't remember the king's name, came to power, and ended up being more demonized. And that was super interesting that you could just go to someone and be like, hey, I need something done to help my crops grow. And it was considered normal. It was used in relationship with Christianity, I believe, Catholicism. I don't remember which one was being practiced, but it was showed an interconnection between them, and I thought that was super interesting. I had no idea. But yeah, and then they had a section on other witch trials in the world, like Salem, I think places in, I don't remember, but some places in Africa, so that was super cool, and I had no idea about those, and I think I would love to read more books about it. But I read it, so I will say, I did listen to it as an audiobook, and I did struggle with it while they were lovely writers, and the woman who wrote the book were recording it, so I thought that was really fun. But I think I struggled with it a little just because of their accents, which is okay, it happens, so I'm not super upset, but I feel if I would have liked it better if I'd physically read it. I also felt it was a little rambly and jumbly at times. I feel it could have been more coherent, and they have a whole section where they mention that they were trying to write this satirically as a guide to identifying and killing a witch, and putting the history in there. and they stepped away from it because they felt like it would be insensitive, which I agree, but I felt like they had like hints of that, and it just made it feel weird to listen to, and that it just wasn't sticking with a theme. It wasn't sticking with like a way to like tell a story, and it just felt kind of weird. And I think they could have written it like in the sense that they wanted, and it had it been very respectful still and very interesting read. So I was a little upset that they didn't keep it like that, but it's okay. I also heard after, because again, like I said, I love going through the reviews that other people read, that some of the images used in the book were AI, so it makes me kind of worried if anything else was AI. But I ended up rating a 3.9 just because I thought it was super interesting. But yeah. So the next book I read was Queer, A Graphic History by Meg John Barker, who is the writer, and then Jules Shell, who was the illustrator. And I ended up reading, obviously read it physically, have it right here. I ended up reading this for school for my LGBTQ studies class. And it's a graphic novel about queer theory and some of the pioneers in like the field, and along with criticisms and some criticisms of their theories, and sort of just some like sort of ways that like queerness is viewed in like an academic sense, or like in a what's it called, a like in the sense of like how it actually like applies to like real world things. It's weird to describe, but it was fun. I liked it. It was a very quick and easy read. I mean, like, I read it a little bit differently because, like, I was reading it for school, but I liked the illustrations. It was very unique. I've never read a non-fiction book that had illustrations. Just some examples. Let me find some more. Super cool. It was, yeah, again, very easy read. Illustrations were fun, but I felt like it was too general for me to get anything worthwhile out of it. And also should have been named Queer Theory, A Graphic History. When I read this, I'm like, Queer Graphic Theory, A Graphic History. I'm like, oh, so, we're going to be learning about, possibly, like, Stonewall or other things that, especially in other things that, like, queer activism, or sort of the way that some of the things that they were dealing with in the past, but it was nothing about that, so I was kind of disappointed, maybe just because I had a different view of what was going in. And it just, for what it was, it doesn't really go into a lot of detail about like the queer theorist either. Like I said, it was like very brief, very like overview, which I think is great, but I personally want more. It also emphasizes the need for intersectionality, but doesn't really feel intersectional itself, as it had a very white, able-bodied, and cisgender focus. And it just didn't really feel structured. That was kind of upsetting. I'm like, it kind of just jumped all over the place, and yeah, but I ended up giving it a 2.9. Wrote it physically too. The next book I ended up reading was also for the same class, and it was book. And it was Transgender History by they're not in the view. It was Transgender History by Susan Stryker. Again, read it physically and for school. And it covers trans history and culture and like activism in America from very early on, like 1600s-ish to modern times. It covers a lot of important trans figures like Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, Miss Major, and so on, along with a lot of pre-Stonewall activist movements like Compton's cafeteria riots, and sort of just like, it was a very general history book. I learned a lot of interesting things, and a lot of things I didn't know, like mostly a lot of the pre-Stonewall events I didn't know about, so super fun to read. One thing was that, I mean, like, kind of a gripe, because I don't think that's what the author was trying to do, but it didn't focus a lot on transgender, on like other transgender identities, like non-binary individuals, or gender fluid people. So, which again, like, I'm not upset about, since again, I don't think that was Susan's goal, but it would have been nice, because I feel like they're still really important to the community. It also just had a huge focus on trans women, which again, like, isn't really a bad thing, but it didn't really focus on any of it had like really focused on trans men. There's like maybe one section on a trans man activist, Lou Sullivan, so I need to do my own research on other trans men who made an impact. But it just felt really skewed. Like, or maybe that was just mostly trans women were doing it. I don't know. Like I said, I need to do research. And it did feel a little dated as it was originally written in 2008, but the third edition does have some like modern mentions. So that was so it was cool. Just I wish I could like have read the original ones to see like how it changed. It was really funny because most people in my class had the second edition since this came out relatively recently, and I had the third. So I'm like, wow, I got to see some of the changes, but not a lot. But yeah, no, and then, but yeah, no, it was good. Again, learned a lot. I think this is a really good, maybe like introductory if you don't really know a lot. Covers a lot of broad things. And I actually almost ended up meeting her because she was doing a book tour and they were at Giovanni's room in Philly, but I was too tired to go. As a previous day, I went to DC the entire day, so kind of sad. I didn't like dug it out, but it's whatever. I ended up rating this a 3.6, so really great. Yeah. The next book I ended up reading was Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I have the book right here, so I read it physically. I also got this book from my school's like little free library because they just opened one up, so super exciting. I didn't pay anything for it. This was also the first book I used my embosser in. I had to think of the word. So if you see little, I'm gonna get it right there. I have it. Super cute. Loved it. Got it from my boyfriend for a very like belated anniversary gift. So yay. I love embossing my books now. It's my favorite thing. But anyways, about this book. In this book we follow a woman named Elizabeth Zott, who's a chemist in the 50s and 60s, and of course because of that she faces a bunch of sexism in the workplace, and kind of due to that it ends up leading her to become a host for a show called Supper at 6, which she doesn't really want to do, but she has a daughter that she needs to take care of and feed, and this job pays a lot better than what her job was paying, so she does that. This book is a bit non-linear, so the first scene starts with her confronting a man whose daughter is stealing her daughter's food, and he ends up offering her a job because he realizes that she cooks very well, and is a very like, how do I say this like without sound? It's not me, but she's a very eccentric individual for the time, and I think that just intrigues him. So he's like, "You would be great," and she doesn't take it at first. So, at that point, we don't know why she ends up taking it. So we jump back in time, probably about 9 years. I think I did the math. To where Elizabeth, who is a scientist, is stealing some beakers from another lab because she isn't given the materials she needs to do her job, and she ends up meeting Calvin Evans, who's this very famous chemist, who is known for holding a grudge against people, which honestly never really comes back in the book. So I was kind of with his family, but not really. And from there, they become romantically invested in each other, and we explore the relationship and how people now view her because she's dating this hotshot chemist, and people are like, oh, you're with him, so that's kind of only reason why you're anyone's like paying attention to you, or like why you're getting stuff done. Essentially, giving all the credit to the man and saying that she's not worth it. Essentially. So, and specifically, we're kind of going about how, despite she's in a relationship, she keeps her autonomy, especially for her professional work. So it's the feminist book, and for reasons that I won't spoil, she ends up becoming a single mother, which eventually leads her to being fired, hired back, and then quitting because she was put into a lesser position, to where she's essentially forced to take the job on the show. She then uses that to reach out to housewives and empower them while she's grappling with being a single mother and sort of the hardships that come with it in the 60s. I love a woman in STEM. I'm a science major myself, so I think it's I love seeing a woman in STEM. And how she included science in what she was cooking, and I think that's just so interesting to learn. I love baking. I always view that baking is a science, and that's what cooking is as well. So that was super fun. And I loved her journey and just how strong of a character she was, along with the way that she directly or indirectly influenced the woman in her life to take charge of their own lives. And I also love the dog in the book. The dog's name is 630, which was really because reading that, and I saw it at first, and then they ended up like keeping the name, and I'm just like, interesting. But it was like sort of anthropomorphic, so we saw like points in the dog's like POV, so that was super fun. Um, but I feel like some of the other characters in the book were a bit underdeveloped, and they just didn't like they were there to like serve a purpose but not like be a character. And I feel like something I didn't like was that despite this is a feminist novel, some of the women were only like kind of in relation to other men. Like, for example, a bit spoilers if you want to jump ahead. um Her neighbor, she moves into Calvin's house, um for for again reasons I will not spoil. And she meets her neighbor across the street, who's Harriet. She's an older woman who's in an abusive marriage, and sort of like all we kind of learn, like all that really is that she's in an abusive relationship with a man. She's being abused by a man, and obviously she helps out Elizabeth, but she adds like maybe some comments, like as like being a role model and sort of like also motherly figure to her daughter, to Elizabeth's daughter. But again, that was the whole thing. Like, she's kind of being abused by a man, and just some of the woman, it's kind of like, oh, I was this by a man. Like men like eventually leading it, which I know was like time accurate, but it didn't really fit with the theme of the story. Um, so maybe that's just me being a little nitpicky. Being like, well, it was the '60s. Gotta be realistic, but it just didn't feel realistic. And it just, yeah, yeah. Also, some trigger warnings for it. I wasn't warned about that. It caught me off guard. It didn't feel like it fit the book either. But I feel like despite all that, I still really liked the story that that it was telling, and just Elizabeth herself. So, and I ended up giving it a 4.1. So yeah. The next book I read was Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. This is a dual POV rom-com where the two characters, Samantha and Xavier, they meet in his clinic. He's a veterinarian, because she finds or adopts, I don't remember exactly, a baby kitten, but it has some health issues. So they start off on the wrong foot because he essentially tells her to, if you don't have the money to get this very risky surgery that he doesn't really recommend, to put the kitten down because, you don't want to suffer. And his reasons were pretty understandable. Being interested in the medical field, sometimes you have to make decisions you don't want to make or don't feel like the right thing, but it was a very humane decision that he wanted to make. But she says she tells him to F off and that she's gonna, make it work. And she fundraises the money to help the kitten. She comes back to the clinic despite that bad experience to get the cat cleared to fly, and he just asked her out on a date, which is weird. I would not ask my patient's mom out on it. It felt no. So they go out on a date that night. He takes her to a fundraiser like sunset cruise with like puppies to adopt, which is super cute. I actually did like that. And then they kept the date going. Went to like an entertainment place where they had like mini golf, laser tag, escape rooms, arcade stuff, and so they're having a great time. And then they end up getting stuck in a UFO escape room overnight. And of course they just bond. They have like heart to heart, and it's like it's set in stone. They love each other at this point, which is like you guys have known each other for 2 days. So when they get out, he drives her home because she is supposed to be flying out to California to go spend time with her family, which oh man, I'm so sorry, I just got interrupted. Yeah, so up until this moment, it has been mentioned, but like not, not fully to the so I don't know where everyone, my laptop fell and everything. Matter, we'll fix that. So she's supposed to be flying out to California, to go spend time with her family, but it's been mentioned that, she's originally from California, and she's gonna go spend time with she's gonna go be with her family, and that her mother has some early onset dementia. But now we as the readers and Xavier both learn at the same time she's just moving and never coming back to Minnesota, which is where they live. Which I'm like, oh, so you went out on this huge romantic date with this man, and then was just like, yeah, I'm gonna leave forever. Anyways, so they try to end it, like they try to be like, oh, this isn't gonna work out, can't do long distance, and they just, don't talk for like 3 weeks, but of course they just love each other too much, and they get back together. And like they try to make it, they're navigating their long distance relationship that truthfully neither of them like really want to do. Like they just want to be with each other, but they don't want to do the effort of long distance. Like so that was like a huge part of it. And then we're also like the subplots to that, I guess, are them dealing with their own personal family problems. Specifically Samantha, she, her family is adjusting to the fact that her mom has dementia, and it's a big struggle for all of them. Her sister, her brother, her dad, and then her grandma. And then 2 little boys, but they're not like a huge part of it. And just like all the hardships and drama that come along with it. And then Xavier is kind of dealing with the fact that his family it's kind of the fact that he's estranged from his mom and dad, so I'm kind of dealing with the fact that they're kind of trying to get back into his life, and just the hardship of taking on so many hours so he can go see Samantha. But yeah, and then obviously ending, pretty happy ending, I would say. I'm not gonna talk about it, but yeah. I think it was a super fun read. I love the chemistry between the 2 characters. Xavier is, he's the perfect book boyfriend. Everybody wants him. To the point where it's a bit unrealistic, but it was fun. So I'm just like, I didn't mind that much. And then I liked the journey that Samantha's family had, and then how they ended up coming together stronger at the end, being able to care for, her mom. But it was just a little too lusty. More lovey than lusty, which I think was better, to make everything for everything. So it was it was too insta-lovey / lusty for everything they did to make the long distance relationship work. Like I said, they've only known each other for 2 days, and they are doing everything, which I'm like, guys, chill. You can like not to say you can find other people, but like, you guys have known each other for 2 days. Please relax. And then they were just complaining so much about long distance. As someone who's in a long distance, guys, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna be fine. And they were not. I don't know. I felt like they just weren't doing long distance right. And that was just upsetting to me. That's just me though. I think that's just from my personal experience, so I didn't like that. But on top of that, there's just a huge relationship imbalance. Like, Xavier was doing everything, he was working himself to the bone, like 80-hour weeks, not getting sleep. And Samantha just wasn't doing much in, like, relation to that, which, again, you could argue that, like, well, she's taking care of her mother, but, like, it was just so little on her end. It kind of sucked. Yeah. The relationship was kind of, it was a very up and down relationship too. There's things I loved and things I hated. And also just some trigger warnings that is meant in the beginning of the book. But my personal trigger warnings, too much TikTok talk. Too much for, like, I know it's like a modern day book. Like, I don't have any problems like mentioning like some trends or like, like directly mentioning TikTok or Instagram, but there are so many just TikTok references that I disliked. That was super annoying. And they also talked too much about Rhysand from ACOTAR, and I'm just like, okay, it was funny the first time. Mentioned it like I'm so sorry. They mentioned it like 7 other times, and I'm like, okay, that's enough. Please stop. Anyways, I listened to this audiobook and I ended up rating it at 3.2. I wish I could have rated it higher. Like I did genuinely enjoy it, and it was a fun read. But the last book I read,
I just finished last night actually, was Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. This is a novella, and it takes place during Christmas time in a small Irish town in the 80s, where we follow our main character, Bill Furlong, who's a coal merchant, and he's super busy doing his job. And he's super busy doing his job, dropping off coal to people in a town that's kind of dying due to people moving out. It's the 80s, so people are going to, like, I think they mentioned like a lot of people have moved to Dublin or the UK just due to, like, just it being a small town and not really having a lot to it. And he's sort of just going through a rough time mentally as he discovers something bad that is happening in the town, and just sort of reflecting on his own personal life and how it relates to that. And he's just overall just being a family man. He has 5 daughters, a wife, and sort of just kind of just having a rough time. And I get it. Probably just going through some seasonal depression. It was a gorgeous prose. I loved it. I liked Bill as a character. I liked Bill as a character, and it was a very cozy read. I liked the scenes with him and his family. It was sweet. I think I felt like I was a part of the family and their Christmas traditions, and not just like watching it from afar. But I just didn't. Other than that, I didn't really feel a lot from it. Like when I read the reviews afterwards, people were like, I sobbed. I was sobbing. I was, throwing up. It was so sad, and I'm just like, oops, I didn't feel much, and that makes me feel kind of bad because like, it was a decent book. But yeah, I felt it boring, which is worse than it being bad. I'd rather read a bad book than a boring book because boring means they put effort into it. I mean, at least in my opinion, they put effort into it, but it just didn't intrigue me, and it makes me feel bad as a reader. Like, I want to like people's books, and I don't want to find them boring. But anyways, but yeah, I just couldn't find myself to really care about these people. The characters were also a bit flat, except Bill. He was the only really fleshed out character because I guess we're spending all the time in his mind, but nothing really felt like that otherwise. But that was just, I feel like it was just a really short book. Like, I listened to an audiobook, 2 hours, and that was crazy that it was only that long. So, but yeah, it also felt like it was trying to characterize him to be like this amazing man who like this pretty good man who had like some flaws, but he felt like an average dude, which is like okay, but like it didn't feel realistic. So I really wished I liked this more. It was kind of like the disappointing, but like yeah. Anyways, I rated this a 3, just a solid 3, which is very I don't really just rate things like that, but yeah, no, it was great. Anyways, thank you for sticking with me, guys. Sorry, this is my first video, and I have no history or prior experience filming or recording things or talking about my opinions on a camera, so hopefully I did well. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. I had a great time talking about it, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.